Hey everybody, I'm Steve Patterson, correspondent with NBC News, and welcome to NBCU Academy, where we're taking you behind the scenes to tell you how we cover some of the biggest stories of our time. And today, we're obviously talking about wildfires. To help me do that, I've got a special friend of mine. It's Alan Rice. He's a photographer with NBC, specifically here in the LA Bureau. Alan, thanks for joining me, man. We've covered a lot of fires together. Can you remember, what are some of the most memorable fires, like over the last 5 years or so, that you can think of? I can obviously think of the Easy Fire in 2019, where we got dumped on. You remember that moment, and what else do you remember about the last few years?
So we were next to the Reagan Library.
Yeah.
And we wanted to get closer to the flames. That's what we do.
Yep.
And so we left the Reagan Library and went down below to the freeway. And that's when we were starting to do live shots for MSNBC, when a plane approached and we realized, I think somebody said, heads up, which was about the most heads up we got, which is 2 seconds. And then we were dumped on with Phos-Chek, the pink stuff.
Which is that pink, chemical, essentially, that tries to douse the flames.
Yeah, so you, me,
Yep.
the camera, my vehicle, the NBC car, everything we had was pink.
Yeah.
For days,
Yeah.
for months maybe.
I know how dangerous these fires are. You and I have been in the thick of it, as we mentioned several times. There are a lot of dangers when you're covering a fire, specifically the fires that we've had in the last few years. What are some of the dangers and hazards that we encounter while we're out there, and how do you sort of mitigate that when you're trying to do your job?
So the first thing I learned, because fires were not my coverage duty from before, in working in a different NBC bureau. So when I got here, people said, you gotta watch the wind. You gotta see which way it's blowing. And that was really important. So you never wanted to, as I did once with our assignment editor, Graham Robertson, doing a name there. We were driving up near the Morongo Casino, going up the mountain, and you could see the flames from the left, and we had to stop because we knew that they were coming. And I think maybe we even backed down the hill a little bit because, then all of a sudden, as we were backing down, all these cars are passing us really fast because you could tell the wind had shifted and it was going, for me, left to right. And right in front of us, the winds just took the flames. The flames went up and over, and had we been a minute up the road, we would have been part of that problem.
Close call. What are some, like, the smoke is always an issue when you're covering these fires? Like, how do you deal with the fact that you're inhaling all this smoke, you can barely see sometimes, and then you're worried about the wind shifting and the possibility that things could go really wrong? How do you deal with all that while you're trying to work?
Well, now everybody knows what an N95 mask is.
Yes.
But
Crucial.
at the time, we used the masks that we were given that were N95s, and you hope that those help you quite a bit. That and goggles and the clothing that we wear that are fireproof. And there's a little bit of risk-taking, maybe a lot, and you hope that you make good choices and recognize the risks.
Yeah.
And yes, the smoke is always a problem, and you just try to avoid that like you would the flames.
One of the other things I wanted to ask you about was covering fires in California is very unique. There was a court case a few years back that allows us essentially to go anywhere we want. If there's a roadblock and they're telling people to stay back from the flames, we can go right through, which it's good because we get all these incredible shots, but it's also, we have to do a little extra thinking because we're in places that could really put us in danger. What kinds of things are you thinking about with private property, blocking firefighters, when it comes to covering fires in California?
I should have grabbed my phone because on my phone somebody had sent me the rules, government 10259, whatever it was, that gives us access, because every so often you'll run into an officer in California who says you can't go there. And then you say, oh, yes, I can because of that.
Yep.
We are very lucky because I've also covered fires in Arizona, Colorado, Washington State, where our access could be 5 to 10 miles away, and you see maybe some smoke off to the distance, and it's not great coverage. Yeah. But in California, we have complete access, and it's somewhat of an honor system. I think that there's a lot of trust there, and I think that's good because then it allows us to tell what's really going on, where there's evacuations, which roads to take. And I think that's important to give that information out up close, not from 10 miles away.
And, with the honor system, as you mentioned, we could get in the way of firefighters doing their jobs. What kinds of things, kind of tenets do you hold on to when you're, in that honor system covering a fire?
So we always leave the car running and always facing down the road, facing down that we're trying to go, because we always need a way out. That's got to have enough gas in the car and literally make a U-turn and find a way to keep the car running, the van running, whatever vehicle you have, for escape. And even if there's an amazing shot that's right there, if you're blocking the road, common sense would say that's not the place to be. You're better off parking the vehicle down in a wide spot and hiking it back up to get that amazing shot, or the firefighters, with shovels or battling with a hose, because you don't want to be the guy that is causing the fire to be worse. And the same, I think, with drones too. I think that there's been lots of comments about drones.
Sure.
We can't fly drones in national parks and things like that on purpose, so that we don't interfere. They've made rules that we can't interfere, and we shouldn't, with their fire coverage. So I don't know too many people who violate those rules, but every so often you hear about somebody who's blocked the road, or the firefighters got mad at, or they called the newsroom and said, "Who's this person that's in our way? I mean, get them out of here."
You never want to be that person. Never want to be that person. The other thing I wanted to ask you was, climate change has made these fires worse over the last few years. Like, I think we're to a point in which the fires are so bad every year, it seems like it's not fire season, it's just year-round possibility of a major fire. What have you seen, kind of the progression of all the years that you've worked to where we are now, to how bad these fires have gotten?
I'm smiling because there's a funny thing. I remember when I first moved here and it hadn't rained in 3 years. And I said, wow, LA, that's amazing. I love the weather here. And people, kind of slugged me and said, "You idiot, it's a drought." Yeah. And here we are again this year, back in a drought situation. We already know that the fire season is going to be really bad. And so even with all the rain and snow we've had, it's still really bad. And there's no question that we're seeing more fires. We're seeing more often, and more houses and structures and livestock and all kinds of terrible things happening. Entire towns being completely burnt to the ground, and it wasn't like that before. It was fires where they were smaller, they weren't as often.
With all the dangers, the smoke, the flames, having to think about where you are in position to everything else, how do you then focus on the shot composition and getting the shot? This is something I'm always curious about working with you guys. You have so much to think about, and yet you're trying to get the best shots possible. How do you do that, and what are some of the things that you think about, like going into a fire?
You're always drawn to the flame. I don't know what it is. Maybe even as a child, you're always drawn, like a swimming pool, you're always drawn to that thing, that glow. And you are just trying to figure out, and this is really technical, but I think you try to see what's in the foreground, what's in the background. Can you make the flames be here and whatever it is, a cow in the background or something like that? Can you sort of show the perspective of what the danger is to the cow or the houses, the barns, whatever? So you're always trying to see how that is, because the flames itself don't really show up as, just showing burning things don't really do much. You need to have some sense of what it's going to take over, where it's going to eat next.
Yeah, and then also, after the flames and the smoke, part of the story that I think a lot of people miss or don't think about is the human story, right? Like trying to find people to interview, to talk to. A lot of these people that we speak to, unfortunately, have lost a family member, they've lost their home, they've lost their whole community. How do you deal with that in the middle of all this chaos, and then trying to interview people that are dealing with so much? I think you have a real talent for that, by the way.
Thank you. I think the greatest thing about NBC's rules are that we really are very careful about not overstepping bounds. Yeah. I think we never go onto people's property without asking. We never go into an area that we seem is too intrusive. And I like respecting that. And if people come up to us and they want to talk, if we've got somebody who's lost somebody or something and they seem to want to let it out and talk, certainly we want to be there for that, to help them, whether it makes it on TV or not, let it come out so they can just sort of talk about their loss, so be it. But I think that we are always very careful about trying to make good choices about who to ask, and asking, can we talk to you first, especially at something that's just so dangerous and so victimizing, I guess, if that's a word.
Yeah. Yeah, let's say this is somebody's about to have their first fire and they're watching this video. What advice would you give to either reporters or producers, but more specifically your area of expertise, a photographer that's new at this? What kind of advice would you give them?
I think it's just like seeing your first car accident. I think somebody who's never seen, you're gonna want to think this is really exciting, crazy, and you push the button to roll, and you run in there and you just take everything in, which is not how it should be. You need to take a breath. I need to look and see, as I mentioned, where the fire is blowing, so you just don't get hurt yourself. But also, I think you need to see where the story can go. So sure, it's easy to just get some flames burning and a house in the background. But then you have to see, well, where should you be? Where should you be next? Where there is somebody's home that survived, because it's almost like a tornado where one house will be saved and one house won't. And so you pick and choose, and you see without even rolling sometimes what the action is ahead of time. And I think there is that natural response, just hit the go button and just spray everything that's happening, when you really should take a breath and see what's before you.
Last thing about kind of safety. A lot of times we're a team. I think it's very important to stay a team when you're on something like that. It's so crucial. But a lot of times, we'll send shooters up there who are by themselves into really dangerous areas. What kind of gear do you bring? Are you bringing the big camera? Do you try to get something smaller? How do you get in and out? And then how do you stay safe when you're doing something as dangerous as this?
I think the camera choice really depends on the circumstances. I think we've used lots of different cameras for, we shoot on the DSLR, we shoot on a little sort of home video camera, the 270 is what we choose, and then the big 5,000 sometimes. So it really, you have to know how far away you're going. Obviously, the heavier the camera, the more you got to walk back. So I think you have to make those smart choices. But the gear would be, for us, we're using a Live View, that brand of Live. You've got that on your back. You're going to have batteries, so you're going to have something, pockets to get, you're carrying all that.
Yep.
It's 90 some degrees with the heat, so you know that you got to travel light, and you may be even wearing the second set of clothes with your fire gear. So yes, traveling light, and then always try to bring your tripod, but sometimes you can't, right? Sometimes you just know that you're going in, you're getting only a few minutes, and then you got to rush back and rush out. So that doesn't really quite answer your question, what to bring, except I think you have to look at the perspective how long you're going to be, or if the fire's really far away, well, you can bring what you want, get it on a tripod and shoot the long lens and get what you can get that way. But if you're up close, sometimes you can get away with just bringing very few things and getting in and getting out without getting hurt.
No, I think that's even more important than what to bring. It's the mentality of what you're shooting, how long you need to be in there. Did that pink Phos-Chek ever wash out of everything? Is it still? I still see some chips on it when we work together on your camera. Is it still there?
Most people, yes. Most people ask me if it's dangerous.
Yeah.
And if I'm still suffering the effects from it. But I think I've learned that whatever that is, it's in it, is not harmful to the environment.
Fingers crossed.
But yes, there's still specks on the tripod. There's still specks on the lens and the camera and other parts. And I've pretty much stopped chipping away at it because it's created a conversation.
It's a badge of honor.
Well, some people say, hey, you were the guy. You were the guy that got sprayed first head on, the full blast.
Yeah.
So, but it's still there.
Alan Rice, photographer extraordinaire for NBCU here at Los Angeles. Thanks for doing this, Alan. Really appreciate it. You're very good at what you do. I love working with you, so thanks so much. We've got more of this great content on NBCUacademy.com. Check it out there. More stories, more ways to cover the stories that we're always on and always covering, and more about how we cover wildfires, all on NBCUacademy.com. For NBCU Academy, I'm Steve Patterson. Thanks so much.